We think most people are here, so I'll start. My name is Bob Dayton, and my wife, Joni, who's right here, and I are the co-chairs of the Grandparents Association. I'm not sure what that all entails, but I know I'm not in charge of the weather. But we did bring this weather with us from Minnesota. And we are grandparents of Jack and Lewis, class of 16 and 14. We're happy that all of you are here. Thank you for your support, both past and future. And I think my only duty is to introduce Willie Mack, and I'm proud to do that, if he's going to come up and tell us what we need from all of you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, I did say to Bob and Joni that my track record with weather on Grandparents' Day is not very good. There are a lot of things I can control. It's hard enough to control 580 students. Weather is not one I've been able to handle. So I'm delighted to see all of you here. It is fun listening to you talk about classes. I had one parent say, I sat in on Chinese class and it was like Chinese to me. So I don't know how you did with algebra. And I hope you have a wonderful day. There are a couple of athletic events that have been canceled, as you can imagine. Those are posted outside, but otherwise we wanted today to go on pretty much the way we do every day here, and we wanted you to be part of it. And I hope that's been fun for you to sit in on class. I think you should feel just so enormously proud of this school and of also your grandchildren. I say this with some bias in that my mother, current grandmother, is sitting here as well, a proud grandmother. I also it means that I give hundreds of speeches, as you can imagine, but this is a very intimidating audience when she's here. So what I've tried to do over the past few years is share thoughts about different Taft issues when you're here. I think it would be wrong simply to welcome you for 2 minutes and send you on your way. I think you deserve to hear my thinking and the school's thinking about topics. So over the years, we've talked about the honor code. I once talked about the history of the architecture. We've talked about the ways in which I think students need structure at the school. And what I want to do today is I want to talk about writing. It's a topic I don't tire of ever as an English teacher. I've spoken about this with audiences in recent years, partly because I've read and thought a lot about a fascinating book by a guy named Tony Wagner. Tony Wagner wrote a book that I really recommend called The Global Achievement Gap. And it's familiar to the faculty, and it has shaped much of my thinking about what we need to do as a school. And this is a book that's become very important to educators and policymakers of all stripes. Because what Wagner's exploring, and what he's found by doing interviews with corporate executives, is that there is an achievement gap and there's a significant deficit in the skills of young people as they enter the job market today. And one of the things he said, and he's found out, is that it is clear that young graduates don't have the writing skills they need. And that is, our nation is not producing the kind of writers we need in order to be successful in a really competitive global marketplace. So his thesis is a powerful but simple one. And he said, in order to compete in this interconnected globe, there are a number of skills that our young people are going to have. And he says that I fear that American schools are failing to produce those graduates. And as a result, the nation runs the risk of producing graduates who are not prepared for the challenges that they are going to face, and hence what he calls that achievement gap. And here's how he went about finding this out. He tells the story of being on a plane with a person next to him who turns out to be CEO, and he ends up asking him as an educator, what is it that you're looking for in your graduates? And they had a fascinating conversation. And from that, he decided to interview CEOs in industry and corporate world, and he asked them a really simple question. He said, what do you want to see in the people you hire? What skills do you want to see in the young men and women? And what he found out was that most CEOs said there are 7 skills that are needed. And they included things like initiative and problem analysis, the ability to collaborate. But one of the most important was CEOs kept telling him, we need graduates who know how to write, who know how to communicate in speech and print. And sadly, what he discovered was that too many of the nations were not doing the job well. This is what he heard from various sectors, and I mean from all sectors of industry. And what he heard deeply concerned him. This is what a woman who's a VP at Cisco, one of the great companies, multinational companies, observed. She said, the biggest skill people are missing is the ability to communicate, both in written and oral presentations. And to me, it's fascinating and disturbing that here is the leader, or one of the leaders of one of the most powerful and largest multinational companies. It's one whose business model is predicated on the ability to communicate and to connect. It's a company with some of the most sophisticated thinkers about the architecture of technology. And what's their biggest personnel challenge? Finding people who can write and talk. That's the biggest challenge they face. Here's what Robert Gordon, a career Army officer, a two-time fellow in the Bush and Clinton administrations, and now the director of the American Politics program at West Point, said when he was asked, "What do you think teachers should teach?" And he said this with a bunch of exclamation points: "Teach them how to write. Effective communication is key in everything we do. People need to learn to communicate effectively with each other and with external constituencies." And by the way, he said this is true of everybody from the enlisted man up, and he said he saw this convincingly in Iraq. Here's what a VP at Dell said: "We are routinely surprised at the difficulty some young people have in communicating. Verbal skills, written skills, presentation skills. They have enormous difficulty in being clear and concise." Here's the conclusion of the 21st Century Skills Study, which was a massive study that was conducted a few years ago. Quote, "More than half of the surveyed executives said that written communication is important for successful job performance, and over 80% of the respondents reported that high school graduates are deficient." That's a number that should concern us. 80% are deficient. And then I end with a comment from a Taft parent, partner in a top law firm, who once said to me, "Just give me someone who took mid-English at Taft." I like that. Of all the skills that Wagner says is deficient in young graduates, this is the one to me that seems most pressing and most concerning, but I would add, perhaps the one that we can address most convincingly. Now, the question of why, you might say to yourself, why is it that American graduates of the nation's public schools have poor writing skills? Why is that? Well, the answer is complicated. It has to do with some of the thorniest socioeconomic reasons. I won't take them up here. But there's one reason that's simple, even if the solution is complex. In most schools, students don't write enough. Here's what Wagner writes: "If you doubt my observation that about the public classrooms, then those of you who attended those schools should simply ask yourself, how many of your high school teachers demanded that you really think in your oral and written work versus merely memorize and regurgitate? How many of you were required to write an essay where you had developed your well-reasoned interpretation of a piece of literature or the significance of an event in history? How frequently did you develop and test a hypothesis for a science class or explain your thinking about how you solved a complex math problem?" I would point out the obvious. That's exactly what we ask of our students today. So why our schools fail to do this, I think, has a lot to do with class size. It has to do with the pressure to meet state testing. It has to do with union relations, teacher training, federal funding, all of that. But there's no question that our students are not doing enough in the public classroom. Too many of them enter the economy, I think, woefully underskilled as writers. That's bad news. It's bad news for them, and it's bad news for our nation. And the good news is that here we have the resources, I think we have the institutional independence, that is, we can create whatever curriculum we believe most suitable. We have the quality of faculty, we have the ethos to graduate young men and women with precisely what he and the CEOs all pleaded for. Your grandchildren are going to learn how to write here. It takes a lot of time, it takes enormous commitment, and they're going to complain a lot, but they will know how to write when they graduate. And by the way, I would say about complaining, when I was talking to Bob and Joni this morning, their grandson Jack was there, and I said, "Jack, do you get a lot of writing at Taft?" And he said, "Oh my God." I learned a lot about writing when I was a student here. I learned it from a fiercely bright woman who taught me English, who made me allocate words with a kind of parsimonious fanaticism, and who bled so much red ink on my essays that they looked like a crime scene. These were essays I thought I was the next Faulkner or Hemingway, and she would laugh at me. I learned as much from a brilliant and eccentric AP US history teacher who seemed to absolutely delight in an argument if it wobbled even briefly on the scaffold of logic. And I think if you had asked me, can you explain the school's philosophy? Could you identify how you were learning? I don't know that I could have then. I think I would have said, I have to write a lot, I hear a lot of criticism, and then I have to do it over again. but that's not a bad place to start, is it? I think I could today articulate a philosophy, and it's this. First, this. We think at Taft that writing requires fundamental skills and understandings, and that actually there are wrong ways of writing. Taft students learn that while it's important that they develop their own individual voice, and I think we should rejoice in that voice, that doesn't mean that there are no rules. It's not always the most fun part of an English class, but understanding why a comma follows an introductory phrase or clause, or how that topic sentence must shape and identify the topic of that paragraph, those are critical ideas. It's a little bit like the basketball coach with the young players who says, look, you want to dribble behind your back, that's fine, but you're also going to take a lot of foul shots. Second, we think this. We think that as in all areas of skill acquisition, you get better by practicing. The amount of writing a typical Taft student does in his or her career is staggering, and it is often a shock when they get here. Taft students would probably agree with author Jessom West in the quotation about writing. Writing is so difficult, I often feel writers, having had their hell on earth, will escape all punishment after. F. Scott Fitzgerald put it differently. He wrote in a letter to a friend, all good writing is swimming underwater and holding your breath. I think a lot of Taft students would know what that feels like. There is a lot of research out there that says that practice and effort matter more than innate ability. We don't buy it when a student says, I'm a bad writer. We say, you're not the good writer you can be. You'll need to work really hard. You're going to have to practice a lot. And you're going to have to take seriously the feedback, and in time you will improve. In English courses alone, just that one subject alone, we ask a catalog of written expression, reading responses, journal entries, online threaded conversations, passage analysis, argumentative essays, paragraphs. And this doesn't include what happens in Spanish, American history, the biology lab. John Wilson, who's our academic dean, said that of the amount of writing we demand of our students, he said, I think this is the best thing we do. He shared a story this week of a brilliant girl he spoke with about her courses. He said, she's excelling in math and physics, but she's struggling in AP history because at her public school where she came from and where she had straight A's, she never had to write as often or meet demands as stringent. She's going to be fine in time, but we're asking her to do something that she was never asked. Third, we think this. We think you get better by getting accurate, timely, objective feedback. It is very hard work, and this is what makes Taft teachers special. Imagine receiving 14 essays on Macbeth or FDR's New Deal policies, reading each one carefully, making helpful marginal suggestions, and then writing a cogent and clear summarizing comment that both justifies the grade and offers ways to improve. It's really easy to do it if you want to do it badly. Doing it well takes a lot of time. I know this because I remember my days teaching 4 classes. I know it because I watched my wife at the counter in the kitchen all Sunday afternoon correcting essays, and I know there are teachers all across campus doing that. Then remember, you don't teach just 1 class, you teach 4. And then remember, you maybe wrote a note at the bottom of the paper saying, come by my apartment tonight at 9 o'clock so we can go over my comments together. And so the teacher and the student sit together, hunched over the table. The bells ring, saying it's time for lights out. The girl races back to her dorm. The teacher walks down the hall saying good night to students before she goes back to keep correcting. And then finally on writing, we think that students must write across the disciplines to identify and understand not only the commonalities of written expression, but also the distinctions. Writing is not just an English class topic. Think of a typical mid this week. Think of your grandson or granddaughter. She had to complete an analytic essay on Jane Eyre, 3 to 4 pages of discussion that was supported by textual evidence and development. She had to hand in a physics lab on the wave tank with an accompanying essay on reflection, refraction, diffraction, and interference, fully annotated. She had to compose an in-class dialogue in Spanish. And then historical civilizations, the paper had to identify historic and cultural elements in ancient China, which are still evident in the Ming Dynasty. That's a good week. So in short, we are asking students to learn a skill that's enormously difficult. We make them continually practice it. We give them helpful and ongoing feedback, and we write continually across the curriculum. Now, let me be clear. This is not a what's wrong with the kids today talk. This is not a the world is going to hell in a handbasket talk. I actually am enormously optimistic, in particular when I see what happens here. But it's serious. Wagner's identified something that is concerning and at times even ominous. He closes his book in one of his last paragraphs saying, "In today's highly competitive global knowledge economy, all students need new skills for college and careers and citizenship. The failure to give all these students these skills leaves today's youth, and indeed our country, an alarming disadvantage." Now, I like to think that we're the exception to the rule, that there's a generation of under-equipped young men and women who are entering a tremendously competitive world. I think that a Taft tuition is paying for something unique and something of enormous value. I'd like to think that your grandchildren will be singularly skilled and that that ability to write will make them engaged citizens and successful leaders. I think the stakes are very high, and so the work that you saw today, I think, is even more burdened, and I think our aims have to be all the more lofty. My hope was that today you got to have a sense of what we're trying to do. And I hope that you see that what we're trying to do on this campus, I think, is rare indeed, and I think is desperately needed for our nation and the world. And it's with that sense of gratitude and a sense of privilege to have you here. I thank you. I welcome you to a Grandparents' Day, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you.
Head of the Arts Department, conductor of Collegium Musicum. We're going to have a brief performance for you today. Collegium's going to sing 2 numbers, and then TJ and the Thompson and the Jazz Band will close with several numbers. The first 2 are spiritual. Joshua fit the Battle of Jericho, and the second was a tune you know, In the Mood.
The battle of Jericho, Joshua fit the battle, the battle of Jericho, Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, 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 the battle of Jericho, the battle of some tumbling down. The battle of Jericho, Joshua fit the battle, the battle of Jericho, Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Battle of Jericho, Joshua fit the battle, it's the battle of Jericho. Talk about your kings of Gideon. Go on, you can talk about your men of Saul. Go on, yes, you can talk about good old Joshua at the battle of Jericho. That morning, Joshua, the battle of Jericho, the battle of Jericho, the battle of Jericho, the battle of Jericho, the battle of some tumbling down. It's the battle of Jericho. The battle of Jericho. Right up to the walls of Jericho. Jericho. He marched with spear in hand. Lo, that Lord Joshua. With ram horn Joshua cried. 'Twas the battle lamb in my hand. God Almighty. And the lamb she was begins to blow. The battle trumpet begins to sound. Oh, the battle Joshua commanded just to shout. And the walls come tumbling down. Oh Lord, you know that Joshua with the battle. Yes, the battle of Jericho. Jericho
Basie Orchestra, this is The Way You Look Tonight. Off with another tune from the Basie Library. This is a composition by Neil Hefty. It's called Splanky. It really features the whole band, but specifically Zach Lewis on tenor sax and Kira Connolly on the drums. Hope you enjoy it. Are we gonna trade? Yeah, we're trading. Okay, I was wrong. It's gonna include R.J. White on tenor.